Oh my gosh, friends, welcome to Homicide Life on Repeat, the show where we rewatch, we recap, and we relive arguably one of the greatest and most influential television shows of all time. I am Reed Diamond, and I play Detective Mike Kellerman, and I am joined, as always, by my beautiful partner, Detective Tim Bayless, the very sexy and talented Kyle Secor.
It never gets old when you say that. Really. Never gets old.
I feel like our relationship is evolving. It is at levels that I never foresaw.
Yeah. We've
as
knocked
my
out
work
the walls.
wife.
Yeah.
I love you, Kyle, and I freaking love this episode. I'm just going to get right into it. I honestly don't know where to begin because I think this episode is perfect. Episode 107, A Dog and Pony Show. And I have to tell you, this episode, it is perfect. It is an embarrassment of riches. And there is no reason to not immediately bring on the man who put all the pieces together. The auteur, the réalisateur, the filmmaker, the maestro, or as we say in English, the neato keen, fresh director of this episode. What do we got? Got a guest for you. Got a guest for you. Who's it for? All for you. And I have to tell you, everybody, we adore this director. And you know what? You adore this director if you are a fan of the most celebrated television of the past 3 decades. This filmmaker has been at the helm of a ridiculous number of the greatest hours of television ever. We're talking about, I don't know, The Sopranos, Game of Thrones, Deadwood, Mad Men, the pilot for Mad Men. I mean, come on, set the look, the tone of that show. Rome, one of my personal favorites, Sex and the City, House of the Dragons. And also he did a little indie movie called Thor, The Dark World, Terminator Genesis, the great films, Palookaville, and my personal favorite, a movie I adore, The Emperor's New Clothes. He is, of course, because of all this incredible, august, and esteemed work, he is a multiple Emmy Award nominee and a winner for The Sopranos. And this dude, fresh out of NYU Film School with a 30-minute short under his belt, he directed a little show, which is the reason for the season. We are honored, Kyle and I are honored and delighted to welcome the great and the powerful Alan Taylor. Woo! Alan.
Hi, you guys. Haven't seen
buddy.
you in a minute. How does anybody recover from the introductions you give?
It's all earned. We are so excited. We didn't want to do 1 second of this episode talking about this show or art or whatever without bringing you on because
Thank you.
This is amazing. It's amazing how you came to be part of this show in its first season.
And here's something that occurs to me, Alan, is that you've had interviews. Other people have interviewed you, right? They've interviewed you. Other people have interviewed you. You've had a few interviews. But this may be the first time that you've been interviewed by two guys or two people that were there on your first day of professional work. So we were there.
I wasn't there. You were there.
I was there.
Oh, that's right. Reed came in later, right?
I always think Reed has been there from the beginning.
But you were so important to me because also, I don't know if we mentioned this, but you directed the second most amount of Homicide episodes of anyone, only to be outdone by Ken Fink. But not outdone, just in numbers, not in talent or authorship. But yeah, you directed my third episode, and I remember it fondly. It was a brilliant episode, as all your episodes were, but you brought a kinder and a gentler. This was a creative high point, serious milestone for most people, but also a source of great trauma and anxiety, and everyone thought they had that experience alone. The more people we talked to, that's certainly how Kyle and I got together just recently to start this thing, and everyone thought, oh, it's my own private world of insecurity and trauma and fear. And I think you probably had a very unique experience. So I'll stop talking. Tell us how you got here, man.
It's really good to hear other people were having anxious moments.
Traumatized.
I think it was pretty public too, mine. Like you said, I just come out of film school and I was wondering if I would ever direct and was wondering if I was going to be a bartender for the rest of my life. I got a call and Barry Levinson had seen my short film that was about breaking up with my girlfriend. And on the basis of that, he wanted me to come direct this new show that I'd heard about but hadn't been seen yet by anybody. I realized sort of at the time, and I certainly realized now, that the reason he made that crazy choice was, he and Tom Fontana were trying to do a show that broke all the TV rules. And so you can either do that like Picasso, where you learn the craft and then you learn to paint like a child, after that, or you can just get a child and have them paint like a child. And so I think I was the guy that was brought in because I could break the rules. I didn't even know any of them. I looked at the episode a little bit today after because I knew we were going to talk, and boy, it takes me back. It was such a long time ago. There are some things in it that are so charming, and I'm actually proud of them. I think probably the high point of the episode for me is Bayless and Templeton bickering while they get in the car, but don't get in the car. And
It's amazing.
to this day, I remember working that out with you guys, and it was like we sort of invented it on the, and it felt like, actors and directing, and it was a really joyful moment because I could see it was working, and you guys were having fun with it, and I see it in the episode and it works. But man, there is so much that looks so rudimentary. Oof. I look at it, I can't believe I follow a tray into the restaurant. That's against the rules now. you can't start a scene like that.
You'd take that one back if you could. Reed and I oftentimes will look back on our stuff and say, like I've said this to Reed 3 or 4 times, I would take that scene back. I would take that moment back.
There's a lot in there I would take back.
That's the artist's dilemma. I mean, I still wake up in the middle of the night in a cold sweat and think about what I did in a play 30 years ago and how I'd fix it right now, right?
Yeah,
That's part of our journey.
Yeah.
But I have to say to you, though, about this episode, because obviously we're doing this rewatch podcast and we've seen them all. And now the episode before yours was Three Men and a Dina, which is a very special episode of television.
That's a big one.
But I have to say, from the outside and as a fan of Homicide, I think this is a perfect episode. This is the first episode where I think, and I'm going to tell you, and I'm sorry, you're going to have to hear it, I think everything lands. So you've got this brilliant script by Yoshimura where every scene has the mixture of comedy and pathos, but every scene, it's its own independent movie. The script is there, so the dialogue is there, but the actors, for the first time, every single actor has landed. It's the first time I really see Melissa get to do something. You're at the helm of this. So you've created an environment, and I see it as we look at your later episodes, how the actors really are different in your episodes. They're much more present and grounded in a very different way. The shots and the blocking are actually kind of amazing. As you talked about, one of my favorite sequences is every scene with those guys is sort of this beautiful comedy, but not heightened. It's real. So them getting up in the car and then talking over the dog and then talking in the car about the dog and then to finally, to pay off with that moment, dropping the ashes. There are little touches that you do throughout here, just where you put the camera, how you block it, that blew me away. And now we know down the line that you're going to be one of the greatest directors in the history of television. But it's clear there. Just that little moment after Stan talks to Wendy on this doorstep about her kid, and you just go to a shot of him walking away. And I'm like, that's a movie. The whole episode feels like a beautiful independent movie.
Okay, I can't take it anymore. Thank you. That's,
okay,
sorry. Very sweet. But it brought back so many sort of fond, happy, weird, wistful memories like that. I love the way the dog murder plot wraps up with, as you say, throwing the ashes and the cop.
The cop.
Nick Alcott is the name of the cop. It's my favorite scene because he had to get in the boat and row away, and it turns out he can't row. And on the day he didn't know how to work a rowboat, and he was like almost in tears. I think he was so upset. And one of the sort of nicest moments of the whole shoot was him coming over to me later and saying, "You were so nice to me when I totally screwed up." Because the way it was set up was like this is the end of the episode, and the boat has to row away between you and Pembleton, and sort of has to be kind of a metaphor for things. And the poor guy was just like fighting with the oars the whole time. I'm grateful for moments like that, but man, it was scary. It was trial by fire. It was Tom Fontana was really good to me, but I almost got beaten up by the DP.
Well, please, this is what this is all about.
No, it was great. It was my first job, as we've said. Last movie I'd made was like my friends and me in a van. I came to set the first time, and Teamsters and trucks as far as the eye can see. Just looking back now, I realized I was sort of naive enough to not know how out of my depth I was. So I sort of just thought I could do it. The thing that added to that was that it turns out the DP had been pushing to direct for quite a while. It was galling enough that he hadn't been given a chance to direct, and then this kid turns up out of film school, and I'm directing. So he just set about trying to murder me the whole time.
And how would he do that?
He wouldn't listen to anything I said. He would roll his eyes whenever I spoke. If I chose a location, he would curse and walk out of the location. I remember we agreed for one night exterior, which was a big deal back then. Where to put the big lights because we were shooting this way. I got there, he put all the big lights on the other side. And at some point, Tom came and talked to me and said, "I hear this is not going great. Do you want me to talk to this guy?" Tom tells the story that apparently I can't believe I had. I said, "No, I should handle it. I'm the director. I should handle it."
Yeah, right.
Can't believe I had the gumption to do that, and I can't believe. Looking at the episode, I can't believe I survived. I can't believe I went on and had a career afterwards. Thank God for people. Melissa took me out to dinner the night before we started shooting, which was very sweet. but I drank too much, and so I had a hangover on the first day.
You did everything right. You did everything right,
That's
Alan.
exactly right.
And Yaphet Kotto scared the crap out of me. How would he not? And so, I mean, you were really good to me, Kyle, and Melissa tried to be good to me. Daniel let me know that he wasn't going to be directed by a film school student. The revenge there is that of everybody on the show, he's one of the few that I worked with again later, because we cast him on Sopranos in this like heavily ironic way. One of the subplots was Michael Imperioli's character, Christopher Moltisanti, makes this ridiculously terrible horror film.
I love
it. We cast Daniel in a ridiculously horrible horror film. So in a way, it was like, fond memories, and another way, it was kind of sweet revenge for how it went on my first episode.
Watching this, I was beautifully surprised by how good it is, because I just remember seeing you the first couple of days on the set, and you looked like exactly the deer in the headlights. But there was something about you. No, okay, he's a deer in the headlights, but he's got moves, and he's not gonna, and you're gonna keep moving on. And that's what I thought. I thought, oh, he's got this grit to him that belies that kind of innocent, oh, I'm fucked kind of look. Because watching this now, I'm completely blown away by what you did specifically, remembering what happened with Andre and that. Also, Danny Baldwin can't get any better than this episode. He's great in this episode.
The whole cast, I mean, John Polito and Ned Beatty, this was in the early days.
Oh, the kid who played
the kid was
her
amazing.
Son, asking him about sex with his mom. And
it was a brand new show, breaking all the rules and creating its own rules. The rules were already, up and running by the time I got there. So I can't take credit for, most of the way it turned out, because it was the DP who, obviously we couldn't stand each other, but that artful use of camera was already there, and you guys already knew your characters. And, I can take responsibility for things like you and Pembleton getting in the car a little bit, and for the dog subplot. I think I contributed some things, but mostly I felt like I was trying to, hang on while the thing unfolded. Yeah, it makes me curious. I haven't I haven't gone back and watched anything else. It makes me want to look at some of the other episodes. Have you guys watched the whole thing, or are you watching the whole thing?
I watched Autofocus, which Reed also watched, which is the one that introduces Clark and Reed as partners together.
Your second
and is shot
episode
in that
there.
bank building, if you recall.
No, I have to go back and watch it. Okay, well, I'm just going to have to commit to a binge of stuff.
Or not. I mean, this is the thing. That's what's been so neat about this is I'm curious about your perspective on this, but what we've discovered is I don't remember any. I remember shooting almost no scenes of my entire career. I don't remember, but you remember sort of personal interactions, or obviously you're certainly never going to forget being undermined by the DP or some crazy interaction you had with Yaphet. Those are things that always have stayed with one of us. But yeah, the seeing, especially now after 3 decades, you're sort of revisiting them with fresh eyes, and maybe you're even kinder to yourself. I mean, it's interesting because what you bring up, you've worked with so many very intense showrunners and writers, because when I think about your experience, and obviously you persevered because you had the talent, the thing that I always think about is, as professionals, as far as acting, lots of people can act. The art is what you do. It's your talent. It's the muse speaking through you. But the craft of what we do is doing it under the worst possible circumstances with everything marshaled against you. And that's always what it is. My one maxim as an actor, I go, whatever I think it's going to be like on the day, whatever I think it's going to be like, it's not. And I have to remember that every time. Like if I'm shooting a love scene at the beach, it's going to be 40 below. If we think it's the most important scene of the show, you've got 30 minutes to get it because they're losing the light, right? You had this crash course, but you really, because people crumbled on that show for sure, and you thrived.
It's funny because the people at the very, very top felt very supportive and very positive and nurturing. Like Barry Levinson, who I saw for a nanosecond, and Tom was this sort of presiding, warm father figure, which it felt like to me anyway. Yeah, some of the cast were incredibly challenging, and not cast, some of the crew were incredibly challenging. And I mean, the cast too, for a guy who had barely directed anybody but his friends, to try and presume to direct Yaphet Kotto, or I think I actually gave a line reading to John Polito because I was such an idiot and a kid, without even knowing I was doing it. And he turned to me and just said, no line readings. It didn't punch me or get me fired, but it may be from this experience that I started to realize this, that as a director, and I think this applies to every craft, you have to go in with a plan and how you intend to do it and what you want it to be. but you have to know precisely not only what the plan is, but why you like that plan, because you're going to get slammed by actors and weather and crew members and broken things, and you're going to have to try and salvage and adapt whatever the core thing is that you're trying to achieve in the new plan. And you can't sort of hang on to, the shot, the camera has to be here. You can't be sort of stuck on that. You have to know why that shot appealed to you and then try and find that somewhere else. So I think the school of hard knocks that is any production teaches you that. I couldn't believe you guys were doing 22 episodes a season or something.
Yes.
We feel so proud of ourselves these days. We get 8 or 10.
It certainly took its toll. It's funny because there's another episode you directed my first season, The Wedding.
Oh, yeah. That's the one I mentioned, I think. That one I have more memories of, yeah.
Because, Melissa's playing both parts, and you've got the band, and you're doing all that stuff. And for me, my memory of it is just personal because it's like we've been there for 9 months, and it's been grueling. And by this point, everyone's marriages are falling apart. They're at the depths of their alcoholism. It's a crazy sort of process to do 22. The thing that we know about this show is it was unique creatively, but it was also sort of unique culturally on the set. With these great talents went great personalities, and some of the worst behavior that I've ever had the good fortune to be permitted.
It probably primed me to sort of be ready for anything, and then be pleasantly surprised on other shows like Sopranos. There was no bad behavior really. The cast, I think, because Jim and Edie sort of set a tone, and they were king and queen. There was never any weirdness with on set in that way. I'm glad you mentioned the wedding episode, because I sort of quote that one whenever I get into trouble, because I remember, Melissa was playing herself and her twin sister. We had a wedding band that had to perform live. It was my friend's band, and we shot 13 pages in a day. Now I'm, 3 looks like too many sometimes. The episode ends with Yafet coming out and sort of standing in front of the precinct, and he just does a kind of little dance thing, and he's dancing to my friend's music. And so I thought, oh, that's, you've arrived when a culture figure like Yaphet Kotto is actually grooving to your friend's music. I mean, my overall memory is not that it was a hard thing to do, because I think after that first trial by fire, everything was pretty smooth feeling to me. I was sorry that some of the old, I shouldn't say old timers, but like Ned Beatty and John Polito left the show, and I think it was the network felt they had to keep hiring younger and prettier people to keep the show going.
Yeah, Reed. They brought on Reed.
Young, pretty, talented, and
No, it was fine. No, here was the thing, and you may not even know this. It only occurred to me a year ago that that's why I was brought on the show, and no one had known that I'd been preparing to play a cop for like 3 years. And since the pilot of this show, I was like, I'm going to get on that show. And I almost quit acting to become a cop, and I was researching. So when I showed up and they wanted me just to do like kissy face shit, and I just said, oh, no, I can't have a relationship that works. I have to be alcoholic, and I want to be in these bad relationships. I don't want anything to work. What ended up happening is, because of their sort of openness and their, Tom's brilliance, it did morph. But I realized that I was under a misapprehension as to why I was there. Luckily, that character was allowed to transform and have a lovely, gritty experience. But yes, and when I showed up, you talk about your first day, like I always say, no one was excited to see me. I think Kyle said last week, he's like, why is he here? And it took a while.
We know why a new director shows up, Reed.
We do.
But we're not sure.
But why this new director?
A couple of things I want to say. A, how did your experience at Columbia affect you as a director? Why did you transfer from Columbia to New York? What was the impetus to do that? And why can't I find that short film anyplace?
Oh, that's sweet.
Go ahead.
I was at Columbia getting a PhD in history. That's what I intended to do, was be a history professor. And I had this sort of feeling that in my second year there, that the walls were closing in, and I was feeling sort of claustrophobia of academia. And so I thought I would go to NYU and study film instead, which had been the thing I'd already always secretly loved, but didn't think could be a career. But my intention was to sort of go there and learn to make documentaries and sort of do history, but do it in a more public way. And then I went to NYU, and the impulse to make documentaries lasted about 2 weeks, and I was sort of, making pretend things and telling stories and being fictional. I did like the biggest career change or life change I've ever done, which is to go from an academic life into filmmaking. But I sort of stayed within the confines of school to make it feel a little safer. So I went from one New York institution to another New York institution. Yeah, I was at NYU and came out with a short film that changed my life, because it was the short film that Barry saw that got me Homicide, and that a producer saw and got me my first feature. And it's black and white and about breaking up with my girlfriend, and I got really lucky that it hit and sparked. And it was back when we shot in 16 millimeter, and it was lying around in that form. I digitized it, but I haven't put it online yet. One of these days I'll get my kids to do it because they know how to do things.
And how did John Leguizamo, did I mess up his name? How did he come on board?
Wow, you've done your research. I was shooting at NYU, and the great thing about NYU student films and New York is that there's a bunch of out-of-work actors, and they routinely will sort of do little student films just as a way to keep active or maybe get something for a reel. And Leguizamo had done a student film like 2 years before mine. I don't know where I saw him, but I asked him if he would do it, and I sent him the script, and he liked the script. And he'd already been in Casualties of War with De Palma. I mean, he'd already been on Miami Vice. He was already a star, but he lives in New York, and he's one of these actors that likes to work all the time. And so amazingly, he said yes. And then we got closer, and suddenly his schedule changed, and we had to juggle things. And I think NYU was saying, well, you should probably just let him go. And I was thinking, no. Are you crazy? So what we did is we shot a week without him, and then paused and shot a week with him. And that's how we kept him in the movie. And he was great. I mean, he gave it his all. Nobody was paid. He just did it because he wanted to. And so he played the sort of the third wheel, and my ex-girlfriend played herself, and I cast somebody to play me.
That's intense.
The girlfriend played herself.
Yeah,
that was tough. I asked her if she would do it. She said, no, that's ridiculous. It's too painful, because we were broken up. And then like a week later, she said, oh, okay, I'll do it. And that has a happy outcome, because she did it, and she did an amazing job. She had to do it. And then she moved to LA, and she was sort of just working in clubs and bartending, but she'd always liked to write. And when I went out to Hollywood for the first time, because the short was getting so much attention, her answering machine was like filling up with calls to me for the short. And she wound up taking a call for one of them, and it was an agent. And the agent started talking to her about her own work, and she signed with that agent, and she wrote What's Love Got to Do with It, the Tina Turner movie.
Of course.
And then she wrote Set It Off for Queen Latifah, and her career just sort of, took off in features because she had been in that teensy little film and happened to pick up the phone. So yeah, when I talk to aspiring filmmakers, I am a big fan of making short films as a way to try and get in, or try to get work, because it can really change your life.
You looked like you were headed into doing like indie New York gritty films, and then you saw that you needed to pivot.
I don't know if I was wise enough to realize it. I got pivoted rather than when I went to NYU. My heroes were Scorsese, Spike Lee, Jim Jarmusch, indie guys who had gone to NYU, were making very New York-y movies. Another guy named Hal Hartley was making movies at the time, who was doing super cool stuff. He had people like Edie Falco in his movies and things. But yeah, as I was coming out, the sources of funding that had worked for like Jarmusch were collapsing. And I was never going to be a kind of, self-starter brand generator like Spike Lee. I didn't have that in me at all. And so the opportunities for doing the kind of movies I loved seemed harder and harder. And then this thing started to rise, which became the golden age of television. I remember I signed with an agent on the basis of my short film, and they would send me things. I would say, no, I won't do TV. I won't do TV, because I had this idea of only being a feature director. And because TV was routinely stupid back then.
We said the same thing as actors. Yeah, we thought we weren't going to do TV either.
But then they sent me the pilot for Sopranos, and I saw this thing, and I couldn't believe it. It was the kind of movie I wanted to make, or movies I wanted to be involved with. And so I did Sopranos, and one thing led to another, and HBO was rising and giving me the jobs where I could work on great writing. Sopranos led to Mad Men. I'm really grateful for that chance. I still want to make movies, and I'll be chasing that till the day I die. That's what I was scouting for in Europe, because I'll still keep trying to do that. But I pivoted. I got pivoted because the model that I sort of went to film school with in my head was going away, and this new thing that no one had seen before was rising, a sort of brilliantly written, thematically driven, cinematic television being made in America for Americans. I always thought Homicide was like the first step in that direction. It was pre-HBO, it was pre-cable. I can't believe it was a network show.
Well, this is what we try to remind people about all the time, is like there were 3.5 networks, and they were trying to make, before an HBO, they're trying to make an HBO show on network television. You're doing a cop show where you can't curse.
And where they were not resolving cases.
Crossing the line.
Yeah, the only homework that Barry Levinson gave me, and I think all the directors, was to watch Breathless, to watch Godard's Breathless, and sort of learn how to shoot on the cheap. I mean, amazing. That right now it feels at home in the sort of the HBO-defined streamer-defined universe. But back then, I mean, if you look at the comparables that were on other networks at the time, it was like, formulaic, by the book, badly lit.
What's so funny is at the time when I first watched that pilot in 1993 and I watched the first season, it was radical. It seemed radical. It's upsetting. And now it looks like television because you guys, because of the indie cinema that you're talking about dried up, they got to have all of you geniuses with your beautiful, pure aesthetic. That's the reason the golden age of television was able to explode, because now this was the place.
Yeah, I think it was, things like Homicide sort of blazed a trail, but it was tough in network. I mean, that's why I think the network was having a really hard time keeping it on the air. But then the financial model of cable came along that actually supported stuff like this. And so you could then build things that were this smart and challenging. And then I was happy because as that happened, you got a more sophisticated audience and they started demanding more things. And they wanted the shows to look a certain way. They cared about the way the shows looked. If you look at mainstream television before this golden age, it just looked like crap. And nobody expected anything more. It was, everything was front lit and everything, a bunch of close-ups of the actors talking to the camera. But the cinema came into it through like Sopranos and the rest of it. So after a while, it's still a writer-driven medium, but the directors had a chance to really contribute. Is the way it felt to me.
Like on Homicide, a couple things. In the first episode, I'll just stay with that. All of the storylines feel like their own films. And you mentioned the guy somewhat rowing away, and you wanted to keep him in a certain, context. The ending of it with Giardello and his buddy sitting on that bench, the dialogue combined with the way that it was shot, and then bringing the two police officers on horseback at the end, to me I didn't know what was going on, but I was deeply, deeply moved. And I kind of attribute that to you and to the way that you were approaching.
Well, it's funny because I mean, it's so there in the writing, and then getting Michael Constantine to play
oh my God,
the friend.
Yeah.
I mean,
Good God.
So those two were already like carrying it, and then in fact, the way I shot it, having seen it just the other day for this, it's there's nothing inventive about it. It's reverse, raking close-ups and two shots. And the funny thing is, I love the two cops riding away because here's these two warriors who are getting ready to end their careers, but you got to do the job, and the job is a life, and then the two sort of soldier figures riding off. I mean, it was very beautiful, and I can't remember whether we got lucky, and those were like two Baltimore cops that were passing, and we grabbed it, or whether we staged the whole thing. Because if we'd staged the whole thing, I think we would have done a better job of like swinging off the conversation to find them or something. But because it was kind of a cut, I'm wondering maybe we got that, and in a way that's even greater, is sort of that we, if we just grabbed that, which we may well have done. I can't remember.
I'm going to believe right now that you grabbed that. I'm going to say it's magic and kismet.
Look, Yaphet and Michael Constantine were just honed in on that. And Yaphet was doing some sort of poetry reading of his lines. If you noticed, he was making it very precise, and he was using his voice in a way that it was just classic Yaphet. Bam, bam, bam. To me, it was just stunning. I thought that was the best usage of Yaphet and his presence.
I think he was comfortable working with someone like Constantine. Maybe he was trying to show off for him or something.
Gosh, Yaphet? Now wait a second.
But also the air you gave it, I really think, because we've been watching all these episodes and how important your presence is to the mix, you can feel that the actors feel comfortable doing their best work. That's why you're where you are. You can feel it there. So it's obviously it's your innate talent, because Yaphet could be quite challenging. In fact, in your episode Autofocus, when we're in the bank, there's a moment, and I know he's improvising it because he was on his crazy behavior. Me and Clark are up top. He's like, "What are you laughing at?" And that's an improv. That he's not an improv. He's because we're laughing at him because he's doing something bananas downstairs, just being Yaphet. And Clark and I would just laugh in his face because we're like, "What are you doing?" And then he'd get really upset. But in this one, that scene, like I saw two thoroughbred actors in that little row house there, and obviously we can't unstress that Yoshimura's script is pristine. The density of the writing, the purity of the writing, and the Chekhovian balance of like comedy with the pathos.
It feels like Yoshimura and also like Tom Fontana, because that's the world he likes to be in, right? But there are some things, I regret that, because with that kind of dialogue, I feel like it's all the more important to really throw it away sometimes. And it feels like there were a few times when it was, writing, and then it was occasionally performed, and the combination feels a little over the top to me. Never you guys, of course, but
There's an actress named Lisa Gay Hamilton.
Yeah.
Who you also used in Palookaville.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's a perfect example. Okay, but the first time I watched it through, I went, boy, she is really overdoing it here. Now, by my third watch, I'm kind of fond of it. I'm kind of liking what she's doing.
It's funny. It was risky. I mean, what she was doing, I'd forgotten about it until now. I know how brilliant she is because she was in my first feature, and she was great. And she works all the time. She's continued to have sort of a stellar career, and she's I would love to work with her again in a second.
Completely brave choice on her part, and also brave on you to just let it rip like that.
I think the idea was that she knows she's performing, and she's performing but so she's sort of going over the top for the cops that are talking to her.
But I think that was clear. The other funny part about that is I went to Juilliard with Lisa Gay and Andre, but Lisa, I think, was one class ahead of me. She actually gave me my first tour of the school on my first day. She was very sweet to me. Literally, the accent she's using is what they taught us in the late 80s, early 90s as the way to speak in all roles. They were like, and I was just like, they're like, this is received pronunciation.
Right.
And I was just like, if I talk like that, we used to do a joke, like if we were on a cop show, put down the gun, motherfucker. And it was just like, that's how they taught us to talk. And Andre brought it to the show, and he was able to get away with it.
That's wild, because the way she was using her voice was, to me, was outlandish, but it was perfect because the writing, the setting that she was in, also, oh my God, the house where we find the body of the woman the first time with all of the for the drug bust. Every single shot in there's multiple pictures, like mass-produced paintings on the wall.
Oh, right.
Every single shot, so you don't get away from this thing of like, oh, this is whatever is in this house is new money, and the new money comes from drugs.
That's funny. I remember picking that location, could see how the scene could play there. That's the location where the DP turned up and said, "Who the hell picked this location?" I think that was not our finest hour.
Well, you survived and he didn't.
Well, I'm sure he survives in his way, but yeah. I
mean, he's probably alive. Yeah,
he was let go from the show. So and then which was the introduction of the genius Jean de Saconzac, who came in to and watching that guy work, it was like, wow, ninja ballet with a camera. I never forgotten. You do one rehearsal of a scene and he's mapping it, and then the first time he picks up the camera and does it, he's covering all the emotional moments and then swinging into a close up of the bullet in somebody's hand and then tying it all together. It was an amazing way to shoot because you're so told to do coverage in TV, and this was the anti-coverage show. This was just do the scene over and over again, and the camera would do different things every time. Remember how we would sometimes stage it differently in order to get deliberate jump cuts in the action?
Do a different blocking.
Yeah, you could have somebody be leaning against a desk and then they'd be walking across the room, and what continuity problems for any other show were actually became part of the reality and on this show because it felt more documentary-like. You're
being self-critical about that some of the dialogue seemed like dialogue because sometimes the show is written, there's poetry amongst the prose, and sometimes it's hit hard. And when I go back, you see when you hit it too hard and didn't hit it too hard. But what I loved about this episode is there was a lot of dialogue and there was a lot of poetry and there was a lot of cleverness in it, but it felt very real. Like, I love that you started with this because my favorite moment when they were just doing the thing over the car, I was like, this blocking is genius because it's just visually hilarious, like really funny, but also I believe it's really happening.
That was one of my favorite moments. I remember, I don't know, we invented it on the night while shooting it because I can't remember the scene was scripted in the car or out of the car, but the fact that it became this, and then it was like a test. Like, how much can you get in the car and still be able to get back out of the car? And then the fact that you guys finally resolve the thing and then gets interrupted by somebody coming in. No, that was delightful. That was a kind of thing that, makes you want to keep on going. Another
moment of poetry really was the scene in the car with Andre and I talking about the dogs and all the dog names and all the different dog. That to me was poetry as well. It was such great writing and also simple as it can be, but there's a difference between placing a camera behind two actors and shooting them from behind and the way that we did it in this show.
I think this is where I got hooked on it because shooting people from behind became something I just loved to do. And like on Mad Men, it became sort of the signature of the show. We introduced John Hamm's character from behind, and that became the logo for the show, was him shot from behind. And I think it all came from shooting you guys in the back of police cars is where it probably started.
That scene with you and Andre in the car, I know you're going to hate me for this, but I feel like this is when you guys really arrive. I mean, you have this very dramatic episode before Three Men and Adina play, and it heightened at moments. But this one, there's a dynamic between the two of you where I'm like, oh, this is unstoppable. There's this humor, and I think one of the most beautiful moments I've seen, is so moving in the whole Adina saga, is it's said with very few words. At that pond, the little boat pond, as he inexpertly rows away, but I did notice. And also in true homicide style, you're shooting in the rain, right? There's no rain cover, so the rain's falling, which creates this mood. And then just a little tear, and then, Adina Watson, and he's just like, if the world was kids and dogs, it would be better. And it's all there. Everything you need to know. Show it, don't tell it.
I'm so curious. Kyle, how did you get to know Andre? When were you introduced to him? How did you rehearse a lot before the show began? How did you find your relationship and build your partnership? Because it was one of the greats.
Wow, that's a great question. I mean, we met the first night that we all went out for dinner, right before the show began. We were there maybe 2 or 3 days early, and that's it. David Simon took us out for a drive around Baltimore to show us some of the worst parts of town, to show us where all these crimes took place and this drug deals. And he showed us this huge drug deal that was going on in this alley. And that was my introduction to meeting Andre and most of the people in the cast. And we just kind of built it as we went along. It felt like it was in real time. And then when Three Men and Adina came up, that's when we got the script a few days early, and we were with each other like almost 24/7.
Were you rehearsing on your own before?
Yeah. We would get together in each other's apartment, and we'd rehearse there. And when Moses Gunn showed up, then he was included into that, and we were doing that all on our own. And that's when he and I really kind of, really cued in together. But I will say what Reed said is, as important as Three Men and Adina was, to follow it up with this episode was hugely important, because I can imagine viewers at that time were going, well, what's going to be next? And they get this episode that's just filled with this incredible humor, dark humor. Do you remember when you got the script, did you recognize how good it was? Or were you just like, what the fuck am I going to do?
What the fuck am I going to do was just written all over the whole thing. But I think, and I don't think I saw this as being any different. I'm sure I read all the scripts they would give me. So I probably had read 1 to 6, just to sort of try and know what the world was like and what was going on. I remember being happy there was a dog in it, because I'm a dog guy.
We all are.
It felt like I knew that was sort of grounding.
It was a great piece for a live dog to be there with the dead dog.
Oh yeah,
sniffing
a couple of times you see that. Yeah,
where Ned goes to the dead body when they're doing the ride along with Munch, where the dead body's laying in the cans. Was that your choice?
Oh man, I can't remember. This is one of those things where I just,
of course,
it's been too long.
I'll just continue with the same note of praise. What I loved about that scene was, Ned and Munch, just even the choice of the shots and the angles, just them in the squad room. I felt like we were really in the squad room. All the squad room stuff felt great. The box felt great, because also this is the first time Melissa got to sort of come alive on the show. She was sort of like seeing little things here and there and helping, but now she had a case, and I found it very intense, like when she went off in the box. And I also loved, speaking of blocking, you have this scene where you're outside in front of the pier, and it's her and Danny. She's like, do you think I'm, hot? But just the way you framed it, and then where they have to stop because a car's coming out, and then they wave it on and move. That's a little touch, just like getting that moment of Ned walking away, but that touch of the car coming out, which is not convenient. It grounds us in this world, and I feel like we're really there.
I'd love to take responsibility for everything that you like.
We're going to give it to you.
I was trying, my best with Melissa, because she'd done such a nice thing of trying to take the new guy out for dinner the night before. But I think she did because she realized she had more to do in this episode, and she probably wanted to see who's this asshole that I have to work with. But hilarious that I was too naive to know how much to not drink the night before your first big job. So
perfect for homicide.
Everyone was hungover on that show.
Yeah, almost constantly.
Almost constantly.
The first 9 episodes. And by the way, that scene with she and Danny, it's a great scene, and she's so vulnerable during that.
And then they're great types to play against each other. It's funny. It's like on Sopranos or something. We had some of the best actors in the world, and also some complete non-actors in scenes together. And there's something about that energy. So I think there was a range in the actorial chops of the cast on Homicide, its various iterations, but frequently some really great stuff happened between people. I mean, I remember a scene between Daniel and Andre, and they were sort of just great together, even though they have completely different modes of acting and being the character. And it
falling in love with Danny again.
Yes.
Well, you have to see Cleaver, the movie we made for Sopranos. Where,
We all want to see Cleaver.
Hey, Alan, if you would kind of ping pong back and forth here, as you are now, and thinking back to Homicide, what's something that was instilled in you then, or that you brought then as, you know, as a filmmaker, as a human being or whatever, that you can say now that hasn't changed?
Oh, man.
I know, it's a good one.
yeah.
I mean, it could be anything from I still frame this shot the same way.
Well, he also said, like, it couldn't be worse than this.
No, I do think sort of the attitude of, you know, once you start the job, I do have this I realize it's a sort of a romantic notion about the job that you're going to do it. You're going to, it feels like the military or something, or it feels like, sometimes I feel like I notice that it's not in some other people, but that's the only way I know how to do it. And so I, like on Sopranos, on Homicide, after a couple of days, I realized, oh, this is going to be really murderously hard, and I've got somebody who's trying to, you know, sabotage me at the same time. But it's the same feeling as when you get up in the morning at 5 a.m. and go out to a muddy field in Ireland, and you got 600 extras for the battle scene, and only one day to do it, and it's just going to rain and snow and have bright sunlight in alternation all day long. This is the sort of thing that I feel in myself, and I feel it in teammates that I really appreciate, which is this. Okay. And, you're not going to whine. You're not going to run away. You just sort of, okay, we're going to do this now. And it's going to be murder, but you gear up for it and
stay the course.
Yeah. So there's a kind of that energy I love in production. I think one of the things I love about being a director, about being in this business, is that you get to have that feeling. You know, and it can be quite visceral. It can be, 100 people standing on a mountain and with, horrible weather, and you feel that sort of mission, and kind of, and I think I still have that feeling. Sometimes it can be more banal than being on a mountainside with weather. It can be oh, this actor is really not going to it's going to be really hard to work with. Okay, let's do it. There's a DP named Alex Sakharov. Do you know him? Who went on to become a director?
Of course.
He was on Sopranos, and I worked with him a few times, and now he's a director. I think I sort of evolved this thing with him, where you would just hear the worst news in the world, and we would look at each other and say, okay, it's going to be great. And, you do it. So if Yaphet's giving you a hard time and you're out of time and the DP is trying to destroy you, it's going to be great.
I think that's it. That is the lesson. I mean, I always say, like, that's why I never really believed in class per se for acting. My metaphor was class is to what we do as what boot camp is to being in a war. Like, you get the basic idea. When you're there and you can't escape, there is no escape, and there is nothing to do but to persevere. The stakes are different, and you have to have that mindset, and you got to get up and do it again the next day. It doesn't matter what you've done in the past.
Well, it's funny. I think that energy is a beautiful thing, but I realized there was a time in my career where I kind of lost it when I did 2 blockbusters back to back and sort of staggered out of them, thinking, I can't remember why I want to make movies anymore. I can't remember why I thought this was a joyful, beautiful thing to do. And it makes me realize how much you have to have that energy to get through this stuff. And I managed to work my way back into it and get it again. But I noticed that ready energy by its absence,
I think that's an essential journey of, I'll use this, you're an artist because I've actually had dinner with you and you're intimidatingly artistic, but I think that is the journey of an artist. Like, it is, because I had the same thing where you're like, what am I doing? I don't even know how to do this anymore. And then you hit that sort of like nadir and you go like, all right, so you have 2 choices, and then you find your love of it again. And I remember, it happened, I don't know, now it's almost 10 years ago, but I fell in love with acting again, but I'd lost the plot. And I was like, I don't know why I'm doing this, because you'd had certain experiences back to back and just getting kicked in the dick repeatedly. And you're just like, what are we doing here? And then you were like, oh, I love this.
Yeah, I think it maybe it offers a turning point, because you could get to that, being kicked and sort of think, okay, you know what, this is not worth it. And I'm happier over here in my, in my garden, or, but it sort of tests you. And if you come through that, then I think you can sort of recommit in a way that is even more sustainable, once you've been tested like that. But we're making Homicide seem like this like grim, like firing squad.
Now we're talking about art in general.
What's that term? 1,000 cuts or 1,000?
Oh, death by 1,000 cuts.
That's the death by 1,000 cuts. And I'm just going to go slightly back to when you said to Tom Fontana, "I'll handle the DP." Saying to Tom Fontana, "Yeah, why don't you handle that?" That would have been 1 cut. That would have been like you had been lost some of your cuts. And I think that that's something that's really important is that you take responsibility. That's always felt like it for me in the time that I knew you. You took responsibility for your job and for taking care of the set, for taking care of what was going on. And the buck stopped with you.
I would like to think that was true, and I think I try to operate that way. Episodic directing is such a funny job because you are the new guy and you're also the boss in some sense, and those two things are such a weird combo. And I know it's weird for directors doing that, and it must be really weird for cast too. It's like this is you've got a new leader, but they are the only one on set who doesn't know shit because they just turned up. It's a funny combination. So you have to believe in that you've got something to offer and that you can do it and that you're going to help and that you've done your homework to get there. But I'd certainly like to think that I'm like the guy you just described.
You are that guy. Because the other thing I most remember about you too is because it was such an intense environment and it was a quick baptism by fire for me when I got there. It was your second episode, it was my third episode when you came, and you were unafraid to be nice and sweet and who you were. And because it was like walking into like your first day in Stir and you got to punch the biggest guy there, but you were unafraid to just be who you were. And then you got the best out of people and people were excited to see you.
I think I blame Canada for that, maybe because that's where I was brought up, and sort of lead by being friendly and decent was sort of part of the thing. But I do think there are people who then take that for weakness too. So I think it's
100%.
Thank you for taking that as a way to sort of get to work together. I think there are other cast members who saw that same impulse and thought, oh, this guy's a pushover, or this guy,
That was my misstep there. I was young. I don't know how old you were, probably similar ages. I was 28 when I started the show, and I suddenly was thrown into the lion's den.
See, I came out of film school and went into it. What had you done before you came into the show?
I'd done a feature while I was at Juilliard, and then I did Broadway, and then I was going to do just features, and then the business changed, and I started to do television. For me, this was sort of my education of acting on film. When I arrived, I was still much more comfortable on stage than I was in front of the camera, but I remember, oh my God, this is intense, because I was used to sort of like, we're an ensemble, it's going to be a sweet, kind, gentle, and this was a rough place.
We're going to give like massages, do trust exercises.
Just like, we're all in this together. I'll get my own props. Not people storming off to their trailers because you told them to enter from somewhere. Gave them a piece of blocking. I was like, I got to be like these guys because everyone's like really tough and kind of an asshole. And I was like, I tried at some point to like, maybe I can be an asshole. And the lesson I got is like, no, you are who you are. So if someone's a jerk, they can pretend to be nice for a little while, but you're always going to find out they're a jerk. I was totally indoctrinated into taking the Kool-Aid and believing that, oh no, this chaos foments great art and it has to be combative and stuff. And then you get on some other shows and you're going, oh, everyone can get along and still do good work. I was like, oh, can I ask you a super nerdy question?
Please,
Alan?
yes.
When you were getting your PhD in history, because you started at U of T and then you went to Columbia.
Talk about nerd, yeah.
What was your focus? Because I'm the resident historian here. I love history. What was your focus of history?
I studied 19th century philosophy in college, and I was really influenced by books. I read E.P. Thompson's The Making of the English Working Class, and that was sort of about the dawn of capitalism and the industrialization of England. And then I read Michel Foucault, who's this like egghead, fancy pants French philosopher,
yeah.
And he had talked about the origins of the social welfare state in England, but he did it in this incredibly poetic way, and I got all very excited about that. So my specialty was the origins of what we think of now as the modern social welfare state. And my master's thesis was on Jeremy Bentham, who was a utilitarian philosopher who had created this building that was supposed to sort of solve all our problems. It was called the Panopticon. The beauty of the building was that it was built in a circle with a guard tower in the center. And so the guard could see everywhere, but nobody could see the guard. And he thought this physical model could be used for hospitals and prisons and every sort of institution. It's a really sinister thing to sort of spend time exploring. And that's what Foucault did, and that's what I did. Anyway, I could talk about it for hours, even though it's like in some ways so boring. it's
not boring at all.
Politics and social policy in England in 1832, the Poor Laws, but I just loved it. I used to get excited about it. And I think it's because there's authors like E.P. Thompson that sort of made it exciting. The same way that my favorite philosophers in college made that exciting. Gramsci, this Italian Marxist, and Nietzsche, the famous Nietzsche. When you're like a guy in your young early 20s, this stuff can really get in your head and make you excited. Going into film school, I kind of missed that because it's like the academic discourse just went off a hill, went off a cliff. And, we just talked about movies all the time. No one was talking about Foucault and social policy. And so I sort of missed the kind of the intense, shared knowledge and stuff. But I was grateful to get out into a sort of a broader, more democratic field and then, to this day, one of the things I love most about our industry is it's one of the few jobs where, in a given workday, you'll work with people with PhDs and highly trained and work with people who didn't get past high school and who are really good at their jobs. And you're sort of people who have every level of training and every level of educational, whatever, sophistication, but you're all building the same thing together and needing each other. And that person is way better at his job maybe than you are at yours. So I got what I was looking for in the sense of wanting to be in a kind of broader, more democratic world than I was feeling in academia, but I still miss the life of the mind kind of.
Do you still bring that level of intensity and research to the projects that you do? It sounds like that would have been very helpful as a director, bringing that kind of...
I do think my brain still works the same way. And I'm still drawn to historical things. And if even things that aren't history, like Game of Thrones, I still approach it as though it's history. And, did The Many Saints of Newark recently, which was set in the 60s. And I just love trying to sort of really get inside the world and try and understand how it would have been. And so some of the same things appeal. Yeah, get to some level of truthfulness kind of. So I think in some ways, the intentions are the same.
From what I read about Palookaville and the research you did and how you wanted Palookaville to be, like doing, was it A Big Deal on Madonna Street?
Yeah.
And a couple of other,
thanks for reminding me.
Yeah, a couple of other Italian, comedy things that you wanted to, and when you see Palookaville, and it's definitely different. It's grounded in something.
It's funny. It was done with such affection, and the stories it's based on by Italo Calvino are these really charming, very simple Italian stories. The movie Big Deal on Madonna Street was almost a neorealist movie, almost in Italy, with the same kind of charming affection for his characters, and trying to get that tone in the movie was a lot of fun for me. And I think it's a very sweet movie. It's got, and the score is a little bit like Nino Rota from Fellini's movies. But our movie came out around the same time as Reservoir Dogs, and nobody was in the mood for a sweet little heist comedy with Italian antecedents. Once they'd been exposed to the what you could get with the Tarantino's vision. So I think the Italian
not too shabby. Yeah,
paid off.
Italians got it.
One place.
Well, we want to be respectful of your time because we could talk to you forever. And
I have a big night. I'm cooking dinner for 3 kids and a dog.
That reminds me, one of my fondest memories of you is I cooked for you and you complimented it. I hold you in the highest esteem as an intellect and as an artist.
And a food critic, clearly.
And I made pesto. I love to cook, but it was my nascent sort of entry into the cooking world. And you're like, this pesto is very good. It's very authentic. I was like, oh, thank God. I was like, Alan Taylor likes my pesto, so that's all that matters.
It's hard to make pesto. It's hard to make it. It's easy to screw it up.
Alan, we're so honored that you took the time to talk to us.
One thing I should say, my kids wear this jacket all the time.
No way.
Yeah, it's funny. It doesn't really look good on me anymore, but...
I wish I still had mine. Alan Taylor, thank you from the bottom of our hearts for joining us.
Thanks for giving me an excuse to talk about this and for hanging out. It's fun to hang out again after we've lived so much life.
What do we got? Got a guess for you.
It's the Thor!
All for you.
That's right. What do we got?
Got a guess for you.
Who's it for?
All for you. I didn't organize the dinner. Well, that was, I didn't organize the dinner, but that was amazing. Very modest fellow, but he was always a very modest fellow.
Canadian.
I knew him as a Canadian, and now that I live in Canada, sort of that old Canadian is fading. I think it's because of the internet. There's less of that stereotypical, iconic, archetypal Canadian person. He was delightful, and he was always delightful, but he was referred to as a Canadian. Clark was really a Canadian as well on some level.
Oh, yes.
As you much maligned, he played for the CFL.
For a while.
For a
one
while.
Game? Was it one game? 2 games?
Is that true?
I think he got injured, or they just didn't like him, and it was one of those 2 reasons.
And when we were doing the show, Yaphet lived in Canada, in Toronto as well.
And I think he stayed up there. I mean, he stayed up there until,
Well, he was probably just trying to sort of exercise his claim to the throne. Perhaps he was doing it through one of the Commonwealth countries, the dominions of the UK. I wish Yaphet had been the next king of England.
That would have been awesome.
King Yaphet? King Koto?
We could have had a room to stay in.
And they've got a lot of rooms, and they don't use them all.
No.
Is there anything about this episode that we didn't discuss?
Reed, I'm going to actually take a look at my notes because I was so fond of so many things that happen in this.
I'm going to sing some praises right now. So we sang the praises of the great Alan Taylor.
Yeah.
But Jim Yoshimura, playwright, writer, screenwriter extraordinaire. This guy now is at the height of his powers with this episode.
Is his second episode?
It's his second episode. It is an embarrassment of riches. The dialogue is so rich. And as we say, if it's not on the page, it's not on the stage. Just that scene, that wonderful scene of you and Andre in the car talking about different types of dogs and their characteristics. Dog should be named Rex. It's just, it's so dense. There's these little moments. I loved the ride-along character. That kid, Danny.
Oh, yeah, Danny.
Dr. Blythe's child. He was not what you would expect. And that actor was so charming and so real. But there's this great moment when they show up to the crime scene that he wants to go to, where the body is laying in the cans in the recycling center. And Ned is stepping down into there, and he says to the uniform, "Hold my hand."
Yeah.
That's a great line. And then the kid's like, "Stan, watch out for needles." He's like, I know, kid. And then Munch is like, "You know what I think? I thought, one bullet did it all." And he's like, "Well, it was good enough for the Warren Commission." So we've got a Kennedy assassination reference.
In the car on the way over there, when Ned says, Danny, what do you want to be? And he says, either a drummer or the Secretary of the Interior.
And then he goes, "Lighten up, man." Like he's just playing with him. Because as we say every week in this great rewatch podcast with my good friend Kyle Secor, my work wife, this show, you have to remember that it is here justifying all of the silly TV stereotypes. So that kid would have been some annoying kid who'd seen in a million commercials, being just one note of like, I'm annoying and precocious. But he's all of these things. And when he puts Bolander on the spot at the wharf rat about, "Are you pleasing my mom?" Because they used to rattle the floorboards. You already know from 2 episodes ago that Bolander is very sensitive about his sexual performance.
Yeah.
And you've never seen that scene before.
Yeah. Didn't see it coming.
And that's just it. I didn't see any moment in this show coming. So when Kay Howard, the A+ student, asks her partner, where she sort of breaks the bounds and the borderlines that should be up between partners, and she goes, "Do you think I'm sexy?" And he is much more respectful of those boundaries that they've set up. And he's like, "Look, we made an agreement about this. Like, we're not going to go there." And she's hurt by it that he doesn't tell her that she's sexy and good looking or hot. I just love those choices because you don't see it coming and you've never seen it coming. Also, with the beautiful comedy of the two of you, as we talked about it, it makes sense that you and Andre, Frank and Tim now have this different tone, this different level, because you have gone through the previous episode of Three Men and a Dina. You've bonded in a different way, and things are now much more so intimate and so connected. But to have this humor, which feels grounded at the same time, like not we're putting jokes in the show, and then he clocks you. We just catch this tear coming down, and we're not really fully on you. We're not having you break down, and you have this very intimate, personal moment that reveals the depth of your sadness about Adina, and he connects with you and takes care of you in a way that's not preachy or predictable, but is homicide, life on the street.
Yeah. It's interesting, he says, "Is this about Molly?" And I say, "No, it's Adina." That's a great moment. I just love that he said that the guy didn't know how to row the boat, because when that guy got in the boat, the first thing I thought was, there's water in that boat. That boat's going to sink. And then when he started pushing away, I thought, his body is so weird in that boat. What is going on? Now that I know he didn't know how to row, it makes so much more sense.
That's kind of perfect, because what I was taking, watching that episode, when I saw the water in the boat, I was like, that's what it's going to be like in a boat in a park. A boat in a park in a city is going to have water in it. It's going to be dirty. And then, why would he know how to row? And then when Frank's sort of helping him with the line, those are the happy accidents, because that's what makes it real. If he was really good and the boat's dry and doesn't have the same impact.
I don't know if it's the set dressing or if it's the whatever, just happenstance. When Edie Falco's bringing in the groceries, did you clock that there's a box open and she's been eating out of it. It was opened in the car. It's now sitting there and she's munching food. I went, oh, that's a great piece of something. Someone decided, let's just open up that box. It might have been her.
Those scenes with Polito and with Lee Crissetti and Chris Thorman, they are spectacular because once again, if we were just on a regular TV show, they would be very earnest, they'd be very maudlin, but there's humor in them and the way you can feel that they have a relationship and it's got all these levels. And when he can't get to the bathroom in time and soils himself and he's just fully embarrassed and mortified, and Crissetti just has the right reaction. He's so paternal, maternal with him, and it's not a big deal, and you do it for me, and it's a real moment that you've definitely never seen on television.
That they play out. It's not just, hey, don't look at me. Okay, I won't look at you and walk away. No, we're going to stay here. We're going to leave the audience in the discomfort of that you've crapped yourself in bed, and that we're going to talk about it a bit more while you're uncomfortable in bed and we're uncomfortable as the audience members.
Yeah, that's Homicide.
Yeah.
One of my most favorite moments is when they write Jake on the board. When the dog's name goes up on the board. That actor who couldn't row, he also has a brilliant comedic moment with him. He was a real blue-collar dog. He just ate regular dog food. He didn't eat anything fancy, Rice Krispies. As Alan talked about, you had different actors and how they had on Sopranos, we had real people and actors. And Pat Moran, the Baltimore casting director, these people were great. Every time I see a local actor that I don't recognize, I look them up immediately because I'm like, well, you must have had an extraordinary career after this because you're so real and so present. Just even Penny in The Dog Pound, she's wonderful.
I remember that day. It was chaos in there because it was a dog pound.
Yeah, it's a real thing. And then the fact that you let her go and you don't turn her in, you do her a solid, that's kind of great. That's Homicide.
Just another great line that our dear friend who, Jake's owner,
Officer Kuhn,
he said, well, Jake was more hound dog than German Shepherd. He didn't die in the line of duty. He died because he was horny.
Because you guys told him that he snuck out the back window. So he's like, oh, he didn't get carbon monoxided by accident by Penny at the pound. He was slipping out to meet his girl. So many great performances. Just the scene in front of the row house with Pony, the suspect.
Oh, God, Jesus, that guy, Danger Will Robinson, is just emitting from him.
It's got all those layers. It's got all those things that we were doing because we were telling a real police story. There's 7% unemployment. It doesn't matter what I do, and this is the only way to make money. You feel like you're on a real street. It presages The Wire in the corner.
That guy is great. From the get-go, he and Danny Baldwin eye fucking each other. And he says, yeah, I got a gun. I'm not going to give it to you, though.
Yeah, I got a gun.
It's illegal.
When the kid goes to Munch, when the kid goes to Bolander, he goes, that's fresh. And Bolander goes to Munch. It's like, fresh? What does that mean? He's like, it's like Nido Keen. Oh, thank God you speak their language. And then we didn't even talk about earlier on, Melissa has this incredible arc where she goes from giving the female officer a really hard time. She calls them secretaries with guns. Like, these people are getting promoted and they're not talented. And he's like, you don't like women. You got a problem with women. You don't have relationships with women. And then she has this very vulnerable sort of this moment where she's like, do you think I'm hot? You told your wife I'm not hot? You're not attracted to me?
Yeah. Yeah. Yes. Before that, she has the moment with the daughter, seeing the daughter going through what she's going through. And then she has the moment that you just spoke of. And then she's got the moment in the room. What was the guy's name who's in the box with her?
Lawrence Gilliard Jr., who became D'Angelo Barnes on The Wire.
Well, she goes off on him. Yeah, Melissa really has a great journey in this one.
First time we get to see her really sort of show her chops off, and she's got deep chop. It was a great episode.
Michael Constantine.
Guy's Constantine.
Just amazing. And he and Yaphet together are, what a pairing. That thing where he points his finger at Yaphet, and it looks like it's going to take forever for his finger to get there, saying, and you're next. Barn father, that college-educated punk.
Well, it's a great pairing. And you know what, Kyle?
What? Are we done?
No, we're a great pairing.
Come
on, buddy. We are a great pairing.
We are.
And we're so happy that you're enjoying our pairing. If you'd like to follow us, we're at Homicide LOR everywhere. We're on YouTube at Homicide LOR because we don't want to make you spell out life on repeat. It's too much. You know what it is. Hey, Homicide LOR. 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 Well, buddy, this has been spectacular. Another
one.
Great episode. And as we say, I'm sure there's lots of things we missed. So you tell us what we missed and we'll do our mea culpas. Hit us up online. We love chatting with you. Kyle, I love you, buddy.
I love you, Reed.
We'll see you guys all
next time.
Next week.
Yeah.
Bye. Oh, and read your Foucault because you need to know about 1830s labor movements.
You can get PDFs of that.